All right, thanks again for joining us. I'm meteorologist Brian Shields with Rusty McCraney once again, and we're back at it, and we're watching this and another day closer to Irma.
And Brian, there hasn't been a lot of changes, to be quite honest. First of all, in Irma or the track, we're going to go over that. But as you said, we're one day closer. So now we're one day closer to having to be prepared for the impacts from Irma. Let's first of all talk about what's happening with Irma right now. If you're just joining us, let's give you the latest. First of all, Irma has not lost any of its strength. It is now the longest a hurricane has ever been this strong ever in recorded history.
On Earth.
Any
basin, Pacific, Atlantic, whatever.
Still 180-mile-an-hour winds. It is moving up to the west-northwest. These are the Turks and Caicos. Unfortunately, they're going to take a direct hit from Irma later today, then moving into the southern Bahamas. So let's first of all talk about the watches and warnings, because we do have some new information to pass along as far as that goes. The northern island of Hispaniola, the northern coastline, that's Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Hurricane warning, Turks and Caicos, southern Bahamas, central Bahamas. Now, Brian, all the way up to the northwest Bahamas, they've issued hurricane warnings. And we actually have some new information on Brevard County as well.
Yeah, we're getting some information on evacuations in some locations. In some spots. And we're going to get you that information as well, not only on Channel 9, but WFTV.com right here on Facebook as well. Plus, we're going to see those watches that are going to be issued for South Florida today. We may get that in the next advisory. I don't believe we have any.
No, we don't have any of that yet.
That'll really set the wheels in motion. Once we start to get the wheels already in motion, but once we get some watches up, that's when the EOCs, the emergency officials departments, they really start to act, and we think more about mandatory evacuations. And then either later today or tomorrow, our coast is going to be under some sort of watch. And with that said, we're going to see more in the way of those evacuations happening. So we're just starting to see the front end of that ongoing here in Central Florida.
Right, I fully expect at least hurricane watches, if not warnings, up for the Keys and Southeast Florida later today. Obviously, Monroe County, mandatory evacuation, same thing, Miami-Dade, Broward. So it'll just go up the coastline. I mean, with the track of Irma as forecast right now, we're going to get some mandatory evacuations, especially along our coastal areas. Irma now about 550 miles, the outer feeder bands, if you will, from Miami. So, getting closer, Brian, still several days away. We still have time to prepare, but now we're getting into that envelope of time where we're not telling people just to be on the lookout. We're telling people to start getting prepared.
The window has closed. You see it here, you see it on the map, and that's why the last couple of days we were saying get ready, have your plan, get supplies, but be patient with us, hang with us. There's a lot of hype forecast out there, and we wanted you to just bear with us. But even though there's still a lot of uncertainty, and we expect some changes, we'll talk about that, the window to prepare is closed. So we want full preparations across Central Florida, especially along the coast, and we'll talk more about that in just a few. But first, the track and the winds right now 180, moving to the west-northwest at 17.
Pressure still 921. Again, it hasn't lost any of its strength. Still forecast to at least be a Cat 5 through 24 hours, if not even 48 hours. Losing strength.
Yeah.
Use the
it only has one way to go.
It only has one way to go.
When you hear it, we can, don't take that with a grain of salt.
But what you're looking at, Brian, for the official Hurricane Center forecast is a landfalling hurricane early Sunday morning as a Category 4 in Miami, around the strength of Andrew or even stronger, and then moving up to the north. This would be a very bad scenario for Central Florida, basically Irma raking the East Coast. Now, we've talked a lot about and by the way, this would be Sunday night into Monday for us. We talked a lot about this cone of uncertainty. I think obviously that has to come into play as well, because you're still looking at tracks anywhere along this what we call track error, and that is still time to play out.
Yeah, and that is the big thing, and that's what we're mentioning. We are telling you now to fully prepare, because that's what we need to do. We're not going to mess around with lives, with your life, your family, your property. You go ahead, prepare. With that said, while you're doing that, we are watching the forecast and the changes. Here's the cone, and these are the possible tracks. With the heading it's on now would be a worst case scenario. Hopefully it's more over here, and that is a possibility. That's why we have this cone. And if it's way the heck out here, we are in much better shape, and you could go ahead and use that bottle of water for the next year for whatever you want to use. So again, these are going to be the changes we'll be watching. We expect some changes. Hopefully we get that shift to the east.
I can't tell you how such a small margin of error we're going to have. Razor thin margin of error. Literally 50 miles to 100 miles shift east would have significant changes on the impacts here in Central Florida. We need this thing to go as far east as it can, because again, this is going to be a much larger, a much stronger storm than Matthew. So even if it takes the same path as Matthew, we're going to have hurricane force winds in the Orlando metro area. The wind field is that wide. What I did here, Brian, is I put the latitude, longitude lines on the track. This is the official track. I want you to notice, friends, this line right here. This is 80 degrees west longitude. What we want to have happen is Irma to recurve to the east of 80, because obviously our coastline bends back to the west. So if Irma were to go straight up 80 west, obviously as it closer to Brevard and Volusia and Flagler counties, now it's farther offshore. So we don't want it to get past 80 west. We don't want it to get that far west, and several of the models do recurve it before then. So let's talk about that as well. I'll let you start off with what we're going to see early, Brian.
Yeah, again, this is the model data. You can see your time frame there. These are our models. Now, the color, this kind of blob back behind it, that's our European model. Basically, copyright issues or whatever.
Right.
We can't put on the actual spaghetti plot, but we have the model here for you, and that's a big gun model. But you see, again, we're going to see that west-northwesterly kind of move, and then we're watching the curve, just what you were talking about. The earlier it curves, the earlier it turns, the better, because we need to keep this sucker off to the east of us big time. The later it curves, that's going to be more of an issue, because that would take it directly into South Florida. Right. So,
and still notice here, Brian, they're all very in tight agreement. Then it's just how quickly they spin the wheel. You know, the HWRF, which is from the Hurricane Center, it's basically a research forecasting model, and the GFS American do keep it offshore. The official track, which I did put on, which is the NHC, and the European model do have it coming inland near the Miami area and then skirting up the coast. So again, you know, you're looking at the Hurricane Center still being on the western side of consensus. So there is still the possibility that maybe they try and eke it slightly east, and let's just hope we keep doing that. But at this point in time, just too close to call. And again, this track would be horrible news for us. And then it moves up the coastline, and folks near Savannah, Georgia will probably have to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly, as it moves up. Yeah. So the winds, is this the Euro?
This is the European model. So the European model would be the stronger winds, the closer approach to Irma to Central Florida.
So just to kind of give you a feel, now I mentioned I want you in place where you need to be by 5 o'clock on Saturday. That may change down the road if the forecast does shift, and we hope it does shift. But 5 o'clock on Saturday, prep's done. You want to be in place. This is going forward into Sunday morning, and you can see getting close to some tropical storm force winds here as we go throughout the day. By 3 o'clock on Sunday, look at some of those winds again. Tropical storm force winds for much of Central Florida. That's
all the way,
that's over
all the
40, 50 mile per hour winds. And as Rusty mentioned, unlike some other storms that have gone up the coast, the reason we need to get it so far to the east is because of that huge wind field, larger than Matthew. Matthew, the winds were in a lot tighter. Once we kept that offshore, we were in better shape. Not at the coast. I know we had a ton of damage for our friends there. But again, that's the issue. So we could see some effects inland. This is 3 o'clock on Sunday.
Yeah, you know, obviously Irma is not forecast to be as strong as what it is right now. But to give you an idea, Irma's tropical storm force winds extend out 185 miles from the center, which, by the way, is much wider than what the state of Florida is. So we would expect her tropical storm force conditions across all of the state. Then you get to the hurricane sustained winds Sunday night. This is when things really go downhill on the European model, Brian, where you basically have sustained hurricane winds along the coastline. Gusts would be well over 100 miles an hour. This is 6 a.m. when there's a center of circulation literally just off of the Cape. And you can see the winds. Now they're coming out of the north. So we could have some of the strongest winds out of the north as the eye is just off to the east. Then it rides up the coastline. And obviously the winds shift back out of the west and eventually into the north and to the east. This is the GFS. I just want to play devil's advocate here. We showed you the European, which again, two major global models, the European, the ECMWF, if you want to look it up, or the GFS American. This is the GFS American. I put the actual track for the Hurricane Center. Notice that and the GFS are very much in agreement until
this point.
Till this point right here. So here's the center on the GFS, the official track for the Hurricane Center, and they diverge a little bit more the farther in time that you go, and this is the one we want.
Yeah, this would
go
be
America.
This would be better. This would be more offshore, and this would make a world of difference. 10, 15 miles as a whole make a world of difference. But like you were saying, we need to get this 100 miles offshore as a whole. But this would be a huge difference. This is a massive problem across Central Florida. This is a whole lot better. And that's what we have to kind of worry about. That's why we have to ask you to prepare even when we have, a lot of uncertainty down the road because of things like this.
And overall, a storm that for Central Florida is still about 700 miles away. To talk about a track error of 15, 30, 50 miles, that's razor thin in things. And remember, hurricanes aren't going to be taking these nice smooth lines. They jog back and forth just like Matthew did.
Lots of wobbles.
Thankfully, jogged a little bit off the coastline right before it hit Brevard County. And again, just the same thing. Again, there's the GFS Center. There's the official track from the Hurricane Center. So we'll see how it plays out, Brian.
Yep.
But obviously now is the time to get prepared. Let's first of all talk about the timing and when folks need to be done.
Yeah, now you want to be done by 5 o'clock on Saturday. Have your preps done. And that's because it's going to be dark and you're going to want to go to bed and you want to wake up where you need to be. Now, we're not going to have a lot of action Saturday night per se on the current forecast path, but we may see some bands way ahead of it try to squeak in. So 5 o'clock, back here in mind, press done, and then I want you where you need to be, and hopefully this changes and we can update this, but 5 o'clock, worst weather like you were just talking about would be really Sunday night and early Monday.
And they're still given that too. I mean, Irma in some of the models tries to slow down a little bit, which would actually be good news because those models that slow it down also recurve it a little bit more and back out towards the Bahamas as well. So this is what we think based on the timing from the Hurricane Center that we see. Now is the time to get prepared. Look, I think, Brian, the next 24 hours, there's going to be a lot of information hitting folks in the face, if you will. There's going to be the watches and warnings that'll be issued. There'll be the evacuation orders that'll be issued. You know, that is all information that you need, but you also need to certainly be preparing about, you know, getting everything that you need as far as supplies go, making sure that you secure your property, board your windows if you have to. One of our reporters just came back and asked me who should board their windows. And in my opinion, I told them, I said, in Central Florida, if you have boards, put them up. I don't care if you live in Marion County or Sumter County. At this point in time, given the forecast track, Irma's the kind of storm that you would do that in.
Yeah, but we just don't want to mess around with Irma. Coastal sections obviously should be boarding up. You want to have your go bag because as we get evacuation orders, you want to be ready to go with medications, what you need. So if you were evacuated from Matthew, there's a high likelihood you are going to be evacuated with Irma, maybe even more extensive in the end. So that's kind of give you a feel. Have that bag ready. And again, all those preps should be done by 5 o'clock. Now, inland, if you have some days off and you don't want to put away the furniture today and you want to watch the forecast with us for another day or so, and if we tell you some changes, you may be okay. And if you have Saturday, wait till Saturday, then you can put it in. It just depends on your personal schedule. That's why we gave you that 3-day window.
Yeah, and the coast do need to take their preparations quicker because, again, when there's tropical storm force winds that are sustained, basically emergency services are shut off, the causeways get closed down, and those folks who live especially in coastal Brevard County along the Bavarian Islands, they know that, but what we're telling them is we expect those conditions to arrive during the afternoon hours of Saturday, and obviously we've been getting reports from Raquel Asa that traffic, especially in I-95 and some other major roads to Turnpike, obviously, just a major mess. And you've got one of the largest metropolitan areas in Miami trying to evacuate to the north into our area, and that means you're going to want to give yourself a lot of extra time.
That wrinkle too for them coming up.
Exactly.
So, but you know, thank you for your patience and hanging with us, avoiding all those kind of hype forecasts. There's been so much out there. We're kind of in that new world with social media. So we want to just take it through it calmly and let you know what's happening. And if we get changes, if we get good news, that is awesome. And we will pass that along right away. But right now we're going on the official forecast track. Get the supplies, get ready. You got time to do so, and then we will go from there.
If any storm in recent memory would, have you get prepared, this is it. You know, this is the one that could bring very major effects with, again, changes that could still be in play, and some of them we hope for the good. But right now, that is simply too early to tell. And to be quite honest, Brian, that curve is going to happen so late in time.
Can't play around with it.
We can't play around with it.
Exactly. I mean, you see the curve too, so it's something we have to watch very carefully. All right, well, that's it, and we'll join you again. We'll keep you posted here on social media, plus those new evacuation orders that have been coming out for parts of Brevard County. We'll have it right here on Facebook, and I will see you from noon to 1 on Channel 9 with that new information from the Hurricane Center. Have a good day.
Have a great day, everyone.